name's Alex. I am a tattoo artist. I've been in the tattoo industry for about the last 20 years, and I'm here with my business partner and co-inventor of Skinlock. And this is Dr. Barrows. He is a board-certified emergency medicine doctor. This guy has taken care of everything from gunshot wounds to anything like a person being helicoptered in. If you can think of any nasty wound, this guy has pretty much taken care of it. So, Tom, let me ask you a question. What is Skinlock? What are we here doing today?
Yeah, well, why don't we start with how I got into this industry. So first of all, Alex and I are childhood friends, next door neighbors growing up. I went to medical school and he became a tattoo artist, and later in life our paths joined again, and he asked me to take a look at what we were doing in the tattoo industry and how we might be able to improve upon it. So one of the things that I was first struck with when I entered a tattoo shop was how fabulous the artistry is, but how unprofessional the wound dressings and the aftercare was. I'd lose my medical license if I closed up a guy's chest with petroleum jelly and plastic wrap, or hamburger meat maxi pads, as Al likes to call them. And I asked him the question, why are you doing this to tattoos, which are effectively wounds into the skin? These materials that tattoo artists use are not sterile. They have no wound healing capabilities. Why aren't you using a better product? So Alex challenged me what that product might be, and as we started looking, we realized there in fact was no medical grade product that makes sense for the tattoo artist. Hence we came up with the idea of Skinlock.
But over the years, I think in the tattoo industry, a lot of the products that have been heavily used have been products that have been adapted from, or adopted I should say, from the dental and medical world. And there really wasn't an alternative out there. There's a lack of education as to what is a good way to dress a tattoo after it is completed. And I was always taught that saran wrap created this barrier so it wouldn't allow the tattoo to seep out and get ink and blood all over your sheets. And then somebody came up with the great idea of creating the meat maxi pad, which obviously is not as good as our product and isn't really a good idea. This stuff is bulk packaged, and it's not really doing the job that it should be doing. It's limited in size and it's not sterile. It's not a sterile product. And this is something that you've complained about to me and pretty much guilted me and made me feel bad. And like you said, then it came up that I had challenged him to come up with a better alternative and help me try to introduce something new to the tattoo industry and to my peers in the industry. And that's when we came up with Skinlock.
Well, let's talk about what a tattoo is first of all. So, most people know some of the layers of the skin. We know that the epidermis is the outer layer and the dermis is the layer below that, and then there's some subcutaneous fat. But basically when somebody gets a tattoo, they're getting tens of thousands of punctures through the epidermis into the dermis, usually in the ballpark of several millimeters into the tissue. And in the process of getting that tattoo, we're breaking open blood vessels, we're damaging cells, and we trigger a wound healing process. Believe it or not, there are some tattoo artists out there who don't think a tattoo is a wound. I challenge them to explain to me the physiology of how the skin heals and recovers from an injury. Tattoos are wounds very much like abrasions, lacerations, and so on and so forth, and they follow a very clear path in healing. The very first phase of wound healing is actually called hemostasis. So when you tear open all these little blood vessels in the skin, all these little capillaries and whatnot, you start to have blood seeping out through these punctures. That also includes extracellular fluid, we call that wound exudate, and so on. And the problem for the tattoo in particular is that process where you have bleeding, this first phase of wound healing, we're sweeping out tattoo ink that the artist really wants to keep in the dermis. So our first goal is, how do we stop that bleeding, or at least reduce it? And how do we prevent that wound exudate from coming up onto the surface and creating a crust that invariably gets picked or pulled or torn off that damages the tattoo? And once that first phase of controlling the bleeding occurs, then we move into the longer phases of wound healing, which include inflammation, where white blood cells come in, potentially ingest and carry away some of the tattoo ink, and then lastly proliferation, where you start healing the wound, where new tissue gets laid in. On the surface, even though it may look like it's healed in as little as a couple of days, the reality is that most of these tattoos, if you did biopsies or looked down in the dermis, 6, 8, even 12 weeks, there's still this healing phenomenon going on. So what we looked at is how do we manage wounds from a medical standpoint? How do we reduce that bleeding? How do we reduce wound exudate? How do we set up a situation so that we can prevent the tattoo from losing ink? And right now the products that are in the market are either things you use while you're tattooing or things you use after you're done tattooing, called Aftercare obviously. And we find that there's actually a little piece that we need, which is called immediate care. So what the tattoo artist does upon the immediate completion of a tattoo can actually have a big impact on how well that tattoo heals.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, with tattoos over the years, I mean, us tattoo artists that are out there in the world, we never really were given a proper education as to how this stuff should work, what we should really do. I think a lot of it is just kind of this grandfathered in of knowledge. And of course, whoever started the knowledge, you know, because you were apprenticed by a certain person, all of a sudden that became the word, and that became the word of God, so to speak. And it's really good to be able to, you know, obviously be linked up with somebody like Dr. Barrows here as a business partner, but also to be educated much better on what a tattoo really is as far as a wound. And I think it's important for people to know. The current dressings and the deficiencies in the dressings that exist out there, like we had mentioned the saran wrap, the plastic wrap, the dry lock pads, and some of the other things that people have been using. I mean, what's your take on that type of stuff?
Well, first of all, I'm amazed that people would spend thousands of dollars to put beautiful artwork into their skin, but then let their artist wrap their raw sensitive skin with plastic wrap like their tattoos no better than a day-old sandwich. I mean, these products were really designed to put food into the refrigerator. They're never designed to be wound dressings. If you think of what saran wrap, plastic wrap, Glad wrap, any of these products do, is essentially they're just trying to create a barrier between the tattoo and the skin. These are not medical grade products. They're not sterile products. There's no evidence that they actually prevent cross-contamination or prevent the spread of infectious diseases, and they can't legally be marketed for those purposes. They're being used off-label by tattoo artists all over the world. And if you think about it, if you have an impermeable plastic film that does nothing to absorb bleeding or wound exudate, what's happening? You're building up this puddle of blood and ink and exudate and mess that's now trapped between the wound and the plastic wrap, and it's a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and things that you really just don't want to walk around. And once you take that thing off, you've got this big sloppy bloody mess that presumably people just throw into their household trash can, and it doesn't seem to me as a very hygienic way to take care of things. We never use plastic wrap to wrap up patients at the hospital, no matter what kind of wound that they have. And if you look at you know, the dry lock pads, that they're super absorbent polymers woven between several layers of fiber, and those are meant to absorb all the blood and slime underneath the hamburger meat that you buy at the grocery store. Those are also not sterile products. They don't do anything to promote healing or reduce bacterial counts. And worst of all is those highly absorbent dry materials can slurp all the water out of your tattoo and potentially leave that exudate of crust behind, which we know is important to eliminate.
Now I know the answer to this because we've worked on the Skinlock together, but what is the benefit of a hydrogel?
Let's define what a hydrogel is. First of all, everyone in the tattoo industry perfectly understands what petroleum jelly is. It's a household name. It's used to grease up the skin, allow the needle to glide, and so many other things in the industry. But a hydrogel is completely unrelated to petroleum-based products. Hydrogels are essentially comprised of polymers which can either be natural or synthetic. In our case, Skinlock is derived from seaweed. It's an alginate polymer, and those polymers will absorb hundreds of times their weight in water or blood or whatever material is coming up from the wound. We've used hydrogel forming materials as wound dressings in healthcare for the better part of 100 years. Alginates are widely used in many wound care products today, and calcium alginate in particular is very well known and established to reduce bleeding. Most calcium alginate containing wound dressings can be shown to reduce bleeding by up to 50%. So when we're looking to formulate a product unique to the tattoo industry, there's several things that we want. Number one is we want it to be transparent, because let's face it, you come out of a tattoo shop with a beautiful new tattoo, you want to show everyone on the street the moment you walk out.
You want to be able to show it to people.
And you don't want to have it all covered with crinkly, dirty saran wrap that's
and
dripping blood
yeah.
out the bottom, and I see people have put paper towels
blood
under
catchers,
it.
blood catchers. We like to put blood catchers under.
So when we use alginates, what we're trying to do is we're trying to really shorten that hemostasis phase so we can reduce the amount of bleeding, and if there is any wound exudate, rather than allow it to collect between the plastic and the skin, we actually want it to be absorbed into the hydrogel itself. So Skinlock contains alginates. Alginates are very well known and have a long history of...
And they're natural. I mean, they're not harmful. So, I mean, I know a lot of people, including myself at one point, but I think a lot of us in the tattoo industry, and we've heard it actually when done conventions, is it gonna, you know, ruin the integrity of the tattoo putting a hydrogel on a tattoo, which people have asked us, you know?
Of course not.
And it's not, because it's natural. I mean, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that because it's such a new product.
Yeah. That's always the one. We get asked a couple of questions pretty routinely. One is, does it damage the tattoo? And many people have never used the product, are afraid to use things that are new for the very reason that you spend 10 hours of your day doing a beautiful work of art. It's kind of hard to maybe want to try something you're not sure of. But we can tell you with 2.5 years worth of product testing and development that in fact this reduces the loss of tattooing. And that's not just a spurious claim. We've tested it on well over 1,000 tattoos. I should mention the product actually was developed in a biotechnology laboratory. All the materials that we use in Skinlock, in fact, are USP ingredients. That's US Pharmacopoeia. So these are medical grade ingredients into this product. It's packaged single use.
So it's a foil pack, and you just kind of rip it open, and believe it or not, you're getting 5 grams inside of one pack, and it goes a long ways. So I mean, you can cover, you know, with one pack, I mean, you could really cover probably a whole forearm all the way around. So I mean, it's good. I mean, there's a lot of benefits. Plus, it's cooling. So it's got that gel, that kind of like cooling, soothing feeling. So I mean, you put it on, this is something you'd probably put on, leave on for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. It wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't degrade or get, you know, it wouldn't be bad if you left it on for 3 to 4 hours, but we recommend 1.5 hours, 2 hours is more than enough. Water soluble, so you just put it underneath water, unlike petroleum products. You put it underneath water and you just kind of rub it and it just kind of dissolves quickly. Obviously, having been heavily tattooed, a lot of the products, you know, that I've used in the past that had petroleum, like Aquaphor and whatnot, you know, it takes a long time to scrub. You got a lot of dry blood on your arm and ink oozing out of the tattoo, and it becomes a big mess to try to clean it, and it hurts. Yeah. I mean, because you're scrubbing, you're trying to get, you know, dry blood off your arm or whatever part of your body was freshly tattooed. With this, there's not any scrubbing. It doesn't hurt to take it off. You know, it just dissolves really, really nicely, so.
Yeah, we should define a little bit about how the product actually works.
Sure.
So, number one, there are different forms of hydrogels that are available. There are hydrogels that you can spread that look like KY jelly, basically, that need to be secured by a secondary dressing. And then there are those things you get at the medical spas where it looks like a seaweed mask with holes cut for the eyes. Those are other examples. Bottom line is that when we apply Skinlock, what we do is we can take a one-size-fits-all approach. We take our hydrogel, Skinlock, which is easily spread over a tattoo of any size, which makes it good for the backs of hands, the sides of necks, even head tattoos, places that are hard to put dressings on. We apply the hydrogel, leaving about a 1/4 inch frame around it, and then we spray it with our film forming spray. And what that does is it actually fixes the gel into place in a transparent, flexible, rubbery membrane that acts as a clear protective shield to reduce the loss of fluids in tattooing. And Skinlock doesn't replace your usual aftercare. So again, this is a product that we call an immediate care product. This is not something that goes home with the end user. This is for the professional tattoo artists in the professional tattoo shop, for them to create a replacement for the existing non-professional dressings that are currently being used. The client is then instructed at 1.5 hours, 2 hours after they've had the tattoo applied. They can go home and wash it off with cool water. It's completely water soluble. You don't need to use soap or scrub at it or anything like that, so it reduces the amount of trauma that people will incur in removing other types of dressings. Once the Skinlock has been washed off in the sink or the shower with cool water, we simply apply whatever lotion based, or the artist can guide the client on what their aftercare product will be. But what you will see is there will be a significant reduction in the amount of ink that ends up on your bed sheets, that ends up, you know, on any other dressings afterwards. And this is a benefit for the tattoo artist, because if you think about it, I understand there are holidays in the tattoo.
There are, yeah.
So what is a holiday?
Well, it's just a little empty spot, you know, that somebody didn't get or just kind of fell out of the tattoo a little bit, so you get this little non-saturated spot. And the nice thing with something like Skinlock, when you're really locking in the ink, you're locking it in. You're not allowing the blood to seep out and carry the ink, so it's going to reduce the need for touch-up work, which is a really important thing. Yep. If you are, you know, the next day, I've been tattooed very heavily, you know, and the next day you're cleaning that tattoo before I've ever used Skinlock, and of course I'm just, you know, wiping tons of ink mixed with, you know, plasma and stuff coming out of my skin, and it's gross. It's kind of boogery and it doesn't really look good. That doesn't happen with this. I mean, it really is locking it in, so it gives that artist, you know, the security that their art is actually being locked into the tattoo. They're not going to lose that saturation. The person getting the tattoo, it's going to reduce the need for them to actually have to go and get touch-up work. So I mean, it's good. I mean, this is real deal stuff, and it's legit. It's a legitimate product.